welcome everyone. Seems like the numbers are going up steadily over the last couple of minutes. So fingers crossed. Yeah, most people that are going to be here are here now. Yeah, just a brief introduction from myself, and then I'll pass you over to James, who's going to do the talk today. So yeah, firstly, obviously we've been doing these meetups in person usually, but given the situation, we decided that we wanted to keep things going. Tough times for everyone at the minute, so wanted to keep the community connected. James kindly stepped forward to do the first talk. I know it's one he's looking forward to giving. So from our side, obviously nothing recruitment focused out of this. It's all about you guys sharing your stories and things like that with each other. If anyone is affected by the situation though and does want to have a chat about the market, anything like that, please do feel free to reach out. All the material from this session and all the other sessions will be passed around as well. So yeah, without further ado from myself, I'll pass you over to James now to get things moving.
Awesome, thanks. I hope everyone can hear me. And I guess I'm going to be the host of the event as well. So I'm going to try and share my screen and see what happens. All right, there you go. So I'm guessing you can see my slides now. I'm going to make that full screen. Awesome. Cool. So let me know if there's any technical issues whilst I give this a go. I have given talks over Zoom before, but to a really small number of people, more like 3. So this is quite a big one, and it's the first time I've given this talk as well. So here's the title, JavaScript. Is it the ultimate company builder? Well, let's find out. So the first thing I'd like to get out of the way is some housekeeping. So I'm trying out something new called Slido, and it's a way for you to ask questions whilst I'm giving the talk, and towards the end of it, I'll be able to go through them and see. And even if you don't have any questions, you can vote for questions that other people have asked as well. So all you have to do is go into Slido, sli.do in your browser, and type in JavaScript, the word JavaScript, and this sort of question answer thing will come up, and I'll be able to see your questions just to the right of me. So this is my party trick, which is cool. So who am I? Well, I'm James. I'm the co-founder of a company called Sticky. We describe ourselves as reality's application layer, and what that means in practical terms is we make stickers that look just like this. See, that's exactly what you can see on the slide, but I've got a real one. And we stick them in places like retail environments or places where people eat and drink, and it allows them to interact with the world around them and make apps, which we call applications that are digital and physical at the same time. Now, we do have a number of non-technical people on the call, and I'm gonna try and keep this technical, then non-technical, then technical, so everyone's sort of got a bit of everything. So we'll start out with what is JavaScript? Okay, like the bloody big question here. Well, it's the language that lets you write code in Chrome or your iPhone or any kind of front-end visual environment, as well as back-end sort of server environments as well, which is where you see Node.js. And the real advantage of JavaScript, of course, is not only can you share expertise by having people writing code for the back-end and the front-end, but you can also share that code as well. So you can actually write code for both environments at the same time, which is pretty awesome. And the real hero of being able to do that is something called V8, which is the JavaScript environment that takes your JavaScript and runs it somewhere, either in your browser, or it could be in a Kubernetes cluster, it could be a cloud function on Amazon, or it could even be on a Raspberry Pi. But it's V8, that's the engine that makes JavaScript portable and quick. Now, I've got some very sensationalist kind of headlines in this talk, I'm afraid. So it's almost like reading The Sun when it comes to the title, so I'm sorry about that. But here's one: JavaScript was not a choice, it was a destiny. Now, for these companies, JavaScript played a really important part in them achieving their engineering and product goals. Now, there's obviously bigger companies that have done more successful things with JavaScript, but I picked these because, with the exception of Entrepreneur First, these are all companies that I've helped write JavaScript for, so I understand them to some degree. Entrepreneur First is the exception because I was in the 10th cohort in 2018. It's pretty much a company builder, a talent investor kind of thing. Turn up, 100 people in a room, and you start a company. So that was quite a life-changing experience. It was also a bet for these companies, though, despite it being their destiny, an important part of their narrative. And that's because things in the JS world, well, they weren't always as good as they are now. So from left to right, we have that V8 engine. Well, that didn't exist until Chrome came out. So the browser world before V8 and Chrome really wasn't a very good place, and JavaScript wasn't very quick. We didn't have WebAssembly. Some of you might remember Browserify as well, which is how we used to package up all our dependencies and ship them to the front end. I mean, that was quite scary times. And then just on NPM and sort of the general ecosystem, we really didn't find very much of a corporate investment in JavaScript. So, you know, you'd find that when you built something and your dependencies, you know, they would all change their versions when it went to production. So there wasn't really this kind of enterprise feeling about the language. And of course, that got better when Microsoft bought GitHub, and now Microsoft and GitHub have just bought NPM as well, because they're seeing how important all of this stuff is for sort of the future of software. And one of my favorite things that I read was from Laurie Voss, who I actually met at a meetup as well. He's the co-founder of NPM, and he explains how NPM works to venture capital sort of investors. And of course, the investors ask, so what percentage of the Fortune 500 use NPM? And of course, it's 100%, right? Because every company uses NPM. And they go, no, come on, really? How many actually use NPM? And it's like, yeah, it's all of them. Or put it this way, there are companies out there that don't use NPM, but none of those companies are in the Fortune 500. It's pretty crazy how important just that tool is in terms of the ecosystem and sort of this idea of making software these days. So this is the crux of my talk, right? Is JavaScript responsible for creating a successful startup? And how can we use JavaScript to do that? How can we relate JavaScript to successful startups? That's the kind of things I want to explore. So let's talk a bit about Y Combinator. Now, I guess a number of people will have heard of Y Combinator, which is good. If not, it's basically a company builder. It's a bit like Entrepreneur First, but they accept people who already have companies or already have very strong ideas. And it runs in the Bay Area, so in California. And companies like Stripe, Airbnb, Coinbase, and Dropbox, what they all have in common is that they all came out of Y Combinator. And the portfolio at YC is worth over $150 billion, which is just obviously a huge amount of money. And the strapline of Y Combinator is something I really like, and it sits at the bottom: make something people want. That's the goal of YC startups, is to make something that people genuinely want. Now, I understand that this sounds really obvious, and I'm sure anyone out there who has a startup idea or has run a startup before would tell you, well, of course, my startup makes something people want, but you'd be surprised actually at the number of startups that don't really get that and don't really find product market fit and don't make something that people genuinely want. So the next question is, how do you make something that people want? You know, how do you make something that YC thinks will be successful and potentially be a part of that $150 billion portfolio? Well, I've kind of split it into 5 ideas, which I've called the 5 chapters of starting a company. Another sensationalist headline there for you. I'm going to go through these one by one, and let's start here. So you got to understand the consumer job to be done. Okay, so I'm going to admit I've been a bit naughty here. I've stolen these 2 images. They're from our investor deck, and don't worry about reading them because the investors don't read them either. But this idea of the consumer job to be done is super exciting. So in the job to be done, it's where you understand the abstract, high-level idea of what someone wants to achieve. So let's talk about Airbnb for a minute. So many people think, well, the real value of Airbnb is that you can just stay in another city and it might be cheaper than a hotel. That's actually not how Airbnb has been really successful, because there's always been cheaper places to stay than hotels, right? What Airbnb has done is understood the job to be done of the consumer, which is to look and seem cool when they're traveling. So they want to stay in an Airbnb because it's different than a hotel. They get to hang out with local people, eat the local food. It's this idea that Airbnb has created as a kind of sense of emotional marketing. That was the consumer job to be done, not just staying somewhere. So if you can understand the most abstract goal of your customer as you build your product, then you'll be in a better place. And you can literally just Google job to be done and you'll find lots and lots of writing about that. And the second one is to challenge your assumptions. Now, we are humans, so we literally cannot avoid making assumptions about the world around us. You know, I'm using my ears right now to assume that there's not a big scary man behind me. So I'm assuming that that's the case. I can actually see behind me as well, but there you go. And all of this comes down to one of the phrase here, right? So the phrase that I hear a lot in the startup world is build it and they will come. Now, I just don't agree with that at all. It's kind of a lot of rubbish, really, because you need to question what you need to build, or if you actually need to build anything at all. So to challenge your assumptions, I promise you, you don't need to build a product. Okay, you don't need to write any code. You can visually prototype what you want to make, and you can even show this to a paying customer and have the paying customer walk through that. Now, I put the Envision logo on this slide as well, really because I think that's the easiest way for you to build a visual prototype of a product, show it to someone, and allow the customer actually to walk through your design, and they'll tell you pretty quickly whether it does what they want, whether it sort of achieves the job to be done for them, and allow you to challenge your assumptions with quite little upfront capital or upfront sort of time investment as well. So that's the second one. Always challenge your assumptions, because we do make them, and it's hard to avoid that. The third point is keep it simple if you want to raise money. So having been through the fundraising process before, when you run a company, you get really, really deep into the problem space. So you get really deep on how things work, all the different players, all the competitors, the technology required, the financials, the modeling, business plans. You get really, really deep on that. And investors don't, because they're seeing lots of companies at the same time, and they just don't care about your business that much. So you need to keep it really simple, really high level, make sure you can explain it. Now, the two things that investors care about the most when it comes to fundraising are traction and technical defensibility. I mean, these seem like obvious things, but I will talk about them very quickly. So the first one on traction is basically how much progress have you made as a startup? Because what funding will do is it will accelerate progress that already exists, but it's quite difficult for funding to create progress. As in, if you have 0 users, it's, there's kind of a signal there that your startup might not be successful. But if you have 10 to 20 users, then putting money in could quite certainly turn that into a much larger number. And the typical sort of key performance indicators we see on progress when you fundraise are basically MAU and ARR. So MAU is monthly active users. That's the number of people who use your app. So not just people sitting in a database somewhere, but people who log in and do a thing. And then ARR, which is annual recurring revenue. That's basically when you sell software per month, so software as a service, is how much do you make from those subscriptions. Now, the second piece I think is much more interesting than traction. That's on technical defensibility. So what they'll be asking there is, can someone else build this product or user base, or both of them? And there's a real distinction here, and I want to talk about why product and user base can be quite different when it comes to fundraising. So the first one on product is sometimes companies make technology which is so good and so special and so good at tackling the consumer's job to be done that they will win purely on the fact that they make a great product. And companies that do that are companies like aerospace companies, because very few companies can be successful in aerospace unless you have lots of money and lots of very clever people who understand how to make airplanes or drones or rockets or something like that. So they have defensibility on product. No one else can come and make their product quickly. The second one is on user base. And this really came to light for me just last night when I was watching The Social Network, the film about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and all of that kind of drama. The film quite rightly highlights that Facebook was not a better product than anything else that was on the market at the time, really. I mean, maybe it was a little bit better. You had MySpace, you had Twitter, I guess, as well, and Bebo and Pixel and these other social networks that were pretty similar to Facebook. But Facebook were very tactical, and they had a very defensible user base because it had this sense of exclusivity, and they grew through the colleges. So whilst Facebook was not a better product than anything else, it certainly won because it had lots and lots of people using it. So it was very difficult for any of the social networks to be as successful as Facebook, purely because it was defensible in its user base, but not its product. So if you want to be successful in startups, I'm afraid you're really going to have to get some defensibility in either of those. It's much harder to get defensibility on the user base one as well, but never mind. The fourth one, measure and improve. Okay, I'm not going to go and give a big hashtag agile talk here, but if you've solved your own problem and you've proven that you can achieve what the job to be done is through your software, eventually you have to make sure that your customers can do that as well, which means you have to build something. So you actually have to go and implement some software at some point. And if you're going to do that, you have to discover whether your software is successful, don't you? And the key phrase for that is you can't improve what you can't measure. And that's kind of the thing you learn in management school 101, is you're never going to make something better unless you can tell that it's got better at all. So you've got to have a feedback loop which is built straight into your product. So that could be something like an NPS score that comes up from time to time, which helps you understand how different segments of customer use your app. Maybe it's something like Hotjar, which is a tool you can use, I think for free, I guess, which will allow you to look at user sessions. So you'll be able to see someone walk through your app step by step when they used it, and be able to see basically what was the pain point and did they actually achieve their job to be done? Did they achieve their goal in that session? So if you embed those feedback loops deeply into your development, then you'll be more likely to be successful because you'll build something that people want. You'll be making something that people want, as YC tells us. And then we get to the fifth and final one, probably the most fun one, I hope, definitely by the title anyway, which is be a castle and build a moat, which is the big sort of circle of water that surrounds a castle. And there's 3 examples of building a moat and being a castle. We'll talk about the first one, which is Tinder, which is a great example of creating product stickiness, also known as addictive behaviors. So again, this is not a way to be malicious. It's not sort of a negative kind of being addictive, but it does create a behavior which makes people want to use your app and get value from it. So Tinder is a great example because they had a user experience, which means you're swiping left and right between people. And you kind of think, what if the next swipe is going to be the one, okay? The magic one person, the true love. It could just be that. So that's quite an addictive, sticky behavior. The next one is network effects. So Facebook, again, is a great example because they baked in network effects. So if you're wondering what the definition of a network effect is, well, I can tell you, it's pretty simple. It's when you add a new user to your app, it increases the value that all of the previous users get. So that's actually something that's quite hard to achieve in some sectors or verticals, but in the case of social networking, it's very obvious. Let's say I've got 5 friends, which is a completely hypothetical scenario because I definitely don't have any friends at all, I'm afraid. Maybe just one who's actually on this call watching me, and I can see his name here. But if I had 5 friends and only 4 of them were on Facebook, then when the 5th friend joins the social network, then that social network becomes more valuable for me without me doing anything, because now I can chat to all of my friends all at once. So if you can find a way to do that, that will really, really help you build a company. And the third part is to nurture a developer ecosystem. In other words, to be the operating system of other startups. Now, AWS is a great example of that because they obviously provide infrastructure and tools and software to create companies. So AWS is effectively a company that creates companies. That's a really valuable place to be in because lots of companies rely on you, and you'll actually create economic growth as well through creating developer tools or having a developer ecosystem. Now, I'm not saying you have to be as big as AWS. Obviously, that would be crazy, and we definitely don't need more billionaires out there. Maybe we do. I don't think so. But if you create tools and software that helps people make apps, then you will definitely be adding value. So what's this got to do with JavaScript? Well, the truth is that JavaScript makes all of this quite easy, and I'm going to give some, hopefully, a bit more practical tips now around how we can connect JavaScript to those 5 ideas. Now, big warning here, I've got some opinions ahead, and when you give technical talks, if you've done one before, opinions are very dangerous. So let's see how that goes. So JavaScript, is it really the ultimate company builder? How does JavaScript connect into here? Well, the first is JavaScript helps you challenge your assumptions a lot. And we know that's important. So through something like Create React App or some other generator, you can have your front end running very, very quickly. You can have it running in a matter of minutes. And I've actually shipped Create React apps commercially to production. So I will defend Create React App to the grave And I also recognize the real value of NPM as well in providing dependencies, which allow us to make things very quickly without reinventing the wheel every time. Second piece is obviously it's very easy for beginners. I think it's easier than it ever was before, partially through the documentation, through the way that we learn languages as well. And in particular, I think the documentation for React is fantastic. So if you want to pick up JavaScript, let's start there. Second piece, well, it's simple, testable, and extensible. Now, because this is a JavaScript meetup, I don't need to tell you why you should write JavaScript unless you're one of the non-technical people. But in general, I like it in particular because you can write procedural code if you want. Now, I like writing functional code, but I don't go wild on it. So I rarely go beyond things like maps and filters, maybe a find, maybe the order reduce if I can remember the order of all the arguments for that. But it allows you to write procedural code as well. And that's useful because in challenging your assumptions, maybe you do go and write something that's a bit gross and messy. And my message to you today would be, don't feel bad about that. Don't feel bad that you're writing some code, which is a bit crap. That's fine. JavaScript will let you write crap code, and that's good because it'll let you build a company. And that's obviously the most important thing. And the last piece is it will give your startup a moat. So it will allow you to commoditize other startups with your product if you build what I was talking about before, this developer ecosystem. So Stripe is a great example of a company that couldn't exist without JavaScript because they make those little paid buttons that you see inside websites that allow you to consumers to pay for things very quickly. And that's obviously a JavaScript plugin that relies on the JavaScript ecosystem to make that software possible, and also how it interacts with other pieces of JavaScript on the page, and then JavaScript on the back end for receiving the payment events and keeping all the state and sort of doing security kind of stuff as well. Then there's also the integrations piece with JavaScript. So if you're out there making an API or something in Node, you can plug into SendGrid in just 3 lines of code. And that's something else that makes JavaScript very powerful and will give your startup a moat if you are a company like Stripe or SendGrid. Again, being a key player in developer ecosystems is a great way to be very defensible and create a successful company. Because ultimately, like you can see on the last line here, you want to be a startup that creates startups in this way of thinking. So moving on now to a but, and this is something that I see come up a lot, and this is probably the most technical bit of the talk so far. So let's get our teeth into it. Now, I hear from people, they say, well, my startup has these sort of technical defensibility requirements to say, I'm literally going to put a giraffe into space, or I'm going to put a lion on the moon, or something crazy like that. And they can't build their software in JavaScript because it's just not good enough. It's just a scripting language. Well, I have actually done a lot of work with lower level computing. So I've written a lot of C, a little bit of C++, and this is all quite a long time ago for me now. So please, no difficult questions in the Slido on C or C++. But it helps to understand really 2 different types of languages. So you have interpreted languages and compiled languages. Interpreted languages are things like Bash or any other kind of shell script. Maybe Python. I'm not an expert on Python, but I'm kind of gonna go with that, which is a bit cheeky. And in a compiled language, you take all of the high-level code you've written as a human, and it boils it all down to machine-level code, which just runs on your computer. It's very difficult to change it after you've done that because it's just running there, kind of bits and bytes right on the hardware. On the other hand, when you have interpreted code, did I get that the right way around? I'm trying, right, okay, let me go back here. I'm trying to say that interpreted code is when it's very high level and it's interpreted in real time, and compiled code is where it runs on the machine. Now, V8 is very clever because it will take your high level code, your script type code, and it will compile it to machine code for you, and it will even be able to optimize and re-optimize dynamically that code as it runs. It's very clever how it does that. It's really understanding the different logical routes through your program. So obviously when you write a JavaScript app, you have some kind of entry point, your index.js, where the code goes in. And from that, it takes lots of different routes through the logic, right? You know, if you've got an if statement and it's if true, then it will always enter the first condition of that and never the second one. So that's how V8 can get good at making your programs quick, is because it can get you into machine code very quickly without you having to care about it. and then it will be able to optimize and actually re-optimize over time the different routes that your program is going in and out, and it'll be able to sort of push sections of your program into memory, you know, instead of storing them somewhere else. So it's pretty cool using V8. So anybody who kind of says that JavaScript's not suitable for very technically defensible startups, I find challenging to buy that. So what happens now? You know, okay, so we've talked about JavaScript being important for successful startups and how you can use it to build companies like that, and how it's an important part of getting to technical defensibility, and how you might use JavaScript as a way to help your investors keep it simple and kind of things like that. But what people often want to know is, what is the first thing I should do if I'm a JavaScript engineer and I want to start a company? Well, the answer is to not write code, believe it or not. I hope that's a little bit of a message that we've been able to get through. It is actually to read a book called The Mum Test. And it's something I learned about when I was at Entrepreneur First, because Entrepreneur First was very hot on challenging our assumptions as well. Lots of clever people in the room, but you know, clever people make assumptions too. In fact, sometimes even more than other people. And this is a great book, and I'll tell you a bit about, well, I can basically tell you what the book says, so you don't need to buy it. How about that? In the Mum Test, it describes this kind of scenario, right? So imagine that you've built this amazing piece of software, the best software you think you've ever seen in the world. It looks great, it feels great, it's responsive, it's absolutely gorgeous. And you go and show it to your mum, and you say, "Mum, what do you think of this software?" And you know what she's going to say? She's going to say, "I think it's awesome. I think that's the best software I've ever seen as well. I think it's great. Well done." And maybe she'll pat you on the head as well, depending on if you're taller or smaller than your mum, but she'll pat you on the head, right? Well, of course that's going to happen. So you're not going to get any kind of honest feedback from your mum, because not only are you talking to the wrong person, but you're also asking the wrong questions. If you say to someone, "Do you like my insert object here?" they will say yes, because it's hard to be nasty. Or rather, it's easy to be nice. So they're going to be nice to you. And you don't want that. You want to know the truth. So in the Mum Test, what you do is you ask questions about that job to be done to actually understand what they want. So let's say you are working, or you were thinking about building a product called the Queue Buster 3000 that will somehow allow people to skip queues or to make queue time easier or something like that. Instead of concentrating on the implementation and asking, "Oh, do you like this feature? Do you like this feature? Do you like this feature of my product?" Go, "Tell me about the time when you go to the airport." And they'll go, "Well, I have to do this, and yes, I have to queue." And I go, "Tell me what happens in the queue. Tell me about what happens when you drop your bag off." And you'll discover a much better picture of consumers' problems when you ask them higher level questions like that, particularly questions that go, "Tell me about this, help me understand that, tell me what happens when you do something else." And the Mum Test will basically show you how to do that. But you know, read it. It's a great book. You probably don't need to read it now. You've heard me talk about it. Just go and ask questions like that. So it is now question time. I can see so far I have absolutely 0 questions, which is a bit upsetting. So if anybody would like to add another one, that would be great. I'm just gonna sit here. So you can see in the top left, you go to sli.do, Slido, I guess you'd call it. Type JavaScript and please be nice. If not, I will answer this one question. Oh, okay, we've got another question. Great. Yeah, love that. Okay. Yes, we've got another more of a comment. That's nice. We push that one to the top. So you can't see what I can see here, but I can see if your questions come in. This Slido thing is amazing. If you ever give a talk, this is the first time I've actually tried it. I think it's brilliant. You should give it a go. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to get started on these questions and see if they come in. So what do you think about Python? Well, I think Python's great for data science. And if you're doing a data science project, you will have access to all of the libraries and tools you need to be successful. And you can containerize it just about as easily as you can for JavaScript as well. So if you have a data science focus, go ahead and build a data science company with Python. Second one here on what's your opinion on choosing languages other than JS for reasons like familiarity, productivity, specific needs, tooling, and libraries, ecosystem, or community? Well, I actually wouldn't pick JavaScript purely for the language itself, which may sound a bit contradictory, but JavaScript makes sense when you have the right people as well. So I'll give an example from my experience doing contract work for a consultancy called 101 Ways. And they told me a great lesson on helping clients and choosing the language for the project. Their message on this was basically why they hire contractors and not sort of permanent employees. So when a company comes to you and says, okay, we've got this problem, can you help me out? And you have 5 or 6 people sitting on the bench, as they call it, like the football bench, sitting there ready to help the company. But it turns out that none of those people can actually do the job. So they can't help the company achieve the goal. So there's not much you can do there apart from 3 things. You can do one thing. You can lie to the company and say, well, actually, we can do this instead. And you're lying to them there. So you're not setting off on the right foot because you're being dishonest. So you're basically fitting your people on your bench to the company. So that's very bad. Second thing you can do is you can just put those people in anyway and let them try and learn how to fit to that environment, which will not go well because the product quality will be pretty rubbish because you put Java devs and JavaScript projects, believe it or not, they're not the same thing. Or the third thing you can do is actually just turn down that piece of work and leave those people on the bench. So what I'm trying to say with that lesson is that it's really important that you think about which people you have, what the market's doing. The JavaScript market is great for hiring engineers right now. So on that one, I think we're fairly safe. Python is a language you use specifically for data science. C++ is something you specifically use for, I guess, very optimized jobs as well. But if you're interested in how you could connect C++ to JavaScript, check out something called Node-GYP, GYP. I'm not quite sure how you say that. And that's basically the bridge between C++ and Node apps. So that might shed some light on how you can get some real performance out of JavaScript V8. So I'm going to move on now we've got more questions. This is so exciting. Okay, JavaScript libraries are always upgrading. How do you handle upgrading production apps and when? Okay, so when I was younger, I used to love using a tool called NCU, which is NPM check update. You can use it and it will bump up all of the dependencies in your package JSON file to the latest version, which seemed great. It's actually very dangerous unless you have very extensive test coverage, because even the slightest change can sort of affect how your app works. So I'd actually avoid doing that. I would probably advise doing big dependency upgrades all at the same time. And yeah, I mean, there's ways you can justify business value from doing that too. So yes, do it as a big chunk of work. That's probably the easiest way. But yes, the libraries change all the time, and that's just the way it is, I guess. Lots of people take the long route of learning web dev before starting an idea. What do you think when you do it yourself via look for a CTO? That's a big question. I think that it helps to be able to write code. I really do, because I think that allows you to really understand more about how these products work. Ultimately, as a CEO or a CTO, you will at some point sort of let go of that project and let it be run by someone else. It helps to understand the trade-offs to have a coding background. So I would definitely try and get some web dev experience in, and try and do some of it yourself, as long as you're not attached to the project in a weird emotional way, because that also never works. Do I think that JavaScript will change the world? Do I believe that JS has this power? Well, I do, because it already has changed the world. I mean, I'm just about old enough to remember writing code before JavaScript and after, and it literally has revolutionized basically how we make software. And I don't think many of these agile principles that we talk about, things like moving fast and breaking things and sort of working in shorter periods of time and doing continuous integration, I think those things would be quite difficult without JavaScript. I mean, they're certainly possible in other languages, but I think JavaScript has made all those principles sort of become real and become possible. Do I think TypeScript or ES7? I don't like TypeScript that much. I've done lots of stuff in TypeScript for super awesome, and that was fine. But personally, I really believe in the power of raw native JavaScript, because I've had issues with the transpile step from TypeScript down to JavaScript, and sometimes that's just been a little bit painful. So I like that, and you can get the power of TypeScript from your editor anyway. All right, let's see how many questions we've got. I think just one more to go from Will here. Assume we agree on the advantage of choosing JavaScript to start a project. Do you think any of this changes when you look at scaling up? Yes, potentially. So I was going to add in my slides earlier that just on moving fast and breaking things and sort of being quite agile and quick and challenging your assumptions, that the thing that a lot of people think about at the start is, oh, I need to break my app down into microservices. And I think you should not do that straight away. But when you get to the point that you do that, you can obviously break out some service into any language you like, and you can have those services talk over HTTP. So yes, there will be a point where that makes sense, and you should feel free to go and do that. That's absolutely your choice. And I think, I'm just checking, I think that's about it. So folks, this has been a pleasure. I'm going to hand back to George now, unless I see any other questions come up. I don't think so. I think your questions were awesome, and I've really enjoyed working on this talk. It's the first talk, first time I've given this talk, actually. It's just different from some of the other ones that I've done before. So I hope you like it, and thanks very much for your time. So I'm just going to pass back to George. Now, I'm not quite sure how we do that, which is a bit embarrassing. So let's just have a look. I'm going to stop sharing my screen first, and let's see if that helps. Okay, I've stopped sharing my screen. So let's see. I'll watch this. Make host. There you go. I think George is in charge now.
Yeah, perfect. Cheers, James. Really enjoyed that. Really good. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm sure you can agree that was a really good talk for the first one. So fingers crossed we can get a few more booked in over the next few weeks. Hopefully James will be kind enough to share the slides with us to pass around in the group. And obviously we've recorded the session as well, so we'll be making it available to everyone to watch back, and for anyone who's missed it to watch at another time as well. If anyone is interested in doing a talk, knows anyone that might be interested in doing one in the future, please do get in touch. And similarly, if anyone's looking for a new JavaScript position at the minute, or is looking to hire, please do reach out. Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in tonight, and yeah, we'll have another one arranged soon and sent out as soon as we got it sorted.
Yes, thank you very much as well. I've been able to attach the slides to the chat in here, but we'll obviously distribute them more widely as well. So
yeah, I've downloaded those, so I'll get those sent out to all members of the group for you, mate.
Awesome. Well,
brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
All right. See you later.
Take care.